Okay, John, thank you so much for offering to come and have a conversation with me.
My
I
pleasure.
just wanted to thank you. I wanted to briefly introduce you to people who don't know you already. I won't go into the complete wealth of your work because it took me quite a while. But you have people can find you on jonastin.com, and also you've written 4 books. You're a singer, songwriter, and a recording artist. You presently teach clinical counseling psychology to university students in California. And for 2 decades, you've been exploring, writing, and teaching about this most extraordinary moment, which is the title of your latest book, which I'm reading.
Lovely.
So, yes, I thought we would just look, what is this waking dream we call life actually made of? I think that's one of the things you say.
You start with the easy question, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is the question that I pose to people in my work. Is in some ways, isn't it just the most basic thing? I mean, here is this reality, we could call it life, that's here, this sense of being alive, and everything. That's the basis of everything. Everything, the whole human drama and everything we experience as human beings is all based on this fundamental reality of aliveness, of life, right? And it seems interesting that we never, most of the time, don't really stop to ask that question. Well, yes, I'm alive. Of course I'm alive. If you ask anyone, I'm alive, yes. Well,
Yeah.
what is that actually? What is life?
Yeah.
Well, it's life, but that's not really an answer in a way. And sometimes joke, people talk about death being the ultimate mystery, but we could say the same thing about life, right? What is it actually? What is it? And when I pose questions like that, or I sometimes frame it as what is experience, it turns out that there's no answer to that question, which we could say is the answer.
Because it's just not definable.
Yeah, you sort of have to do the math, for someone like me or anyone to come along and just say, well, you can't answer the question. I mean, maybe that can be helpful, but to actually explore what's here, what's showing up, what's being experienced, in an effort to discover, what is it actually? What is it made of? Can reveal the unanswerable nature of that question, that this is simply it's too infinite to be able to grasp hold of with any idea, with any concept, with any sort of formulation. And I think that's why it's such a powerful question, is that we are operating as a rule, walking around as humans, imagining that we actually do know what it is, right? That's kind of the
just taking it for granted.
Yeah. I mean, all the language makes this, I think, quite convincing in some ways, because, well, after all, we have all these words that we've developed as languaged creatures to describe the various things that we're encountering. So, I've got words for it. I must know what it is because I've got a word for it, whatever the word might be, to describe, experience, to describe life. But turns out to be a pretty big assumption that we actually know what it is, simply because we have language to seemingly capture it. And
there's also that thing of that life's out there. I'm here and life's out there.
Right. Which, of course, is one of the primary almost ways this gets formulated conceptually, that I exist as an individual, and as an individual I exist in this, what I call the world of circumstance, the world of experience, and taken for granted to be true for the most part, right? But by investigating what's here experientially, feeling into experience, as I say, we can discover that that's not the whole story. That there's another perspective, as I say, that just opens up a very, very, very different way to encounter what's here, to discover that there's not any actual divisions that can be found between one seeming thing and another, between one person and the world, that you can't actually find those boundaries that we presume to be true. And again, our definitions of things keep kind of reinforcing that idea that each thing that I define, including myself, sets sort of the boundary of the limits of what that is. That's what the definition does. So it sort of puts a frame around, oh, this is Colette, this is John, this is an emotion, this is a thought. And we put that boundary around it in a sense when we define it. And then it's very interesting because when you go to find actually what we're presuming to be there, which is the boundary separating one thing from another, it turns out you find seamlessness. You don't find boundaries. You find a whole. You find no no seams in the fabric of experience. Just a wholeness. Just a continuum, if you want to call it that. No boundary.
And that labeling, that putting a label on something, just sort of switches it off. You just, you don't explore it because you just label it and move on. You just think, okay, that's all sorted. I know what all of that is. It just sort of switches you off from it. You detach from it because you never see it really, because you've just labeled it, and it seems to just be that label rather than the essence of what it is.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the labels, one of the functions of language is its powerful function of sort of taking this, well, let's say infinite complexity that seems to be appearing, and dumb it down basically, and simplify it, put it into, right, a frame of reference, like, oh, this is what it is. And that process has its own, I guess, utility, for communication and navigating life in some ways. And we can talk about our experiences with one another, seemingly, and understand one another. It's kind of an amazing thing we do as humans. But what we're actually conveying via language is really just a tiny, 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 infinitesimally small sliver of what's actually occurring. And so
like
that's
the surface layer. Sorry,
the surface
like a
layer.
surface layer.
Yeah. Just the, I mean, it's amazing, right? It's like if I say, I don't know, let's say you ask me, how you're doing, and I say, well, what would I say? Well, I'm happy today, or whatever, or I'm feeling sad today. So what am I actually conveying with that? Well, I'm indicating something with that word, and I'm communicating something, it would seem to you, about my experience. But you take something like sadness. What is that word actually referring to in experience? It's like a whole universe, isn't it? It's a whole universe.
When you start looking,
when you start looking, it's like you go on, like I say, you go on a deep sea dive. Like, well, what's actually there called sadness? And you just keep swimming and swimming and swimming, metaphorically speaking, through that experience. And the remarkable thing is you never come to the end of that search for what the essence of it is. You never find the essence. And that's the basic notion of emptiness in the Buddhist tradition, that when you go to look for the identity of something, of a phenomena, like its essence, or what makes sadness, or what makes John or Colette, like what is their essence? You always come up empty-handed. You don't find the essence. It's because to find the essence would be to determine what it is, to define it again, right? And when I look for that essence in anything, I always come up empty-handed. I'm never able to resolve what it is, to determine what it is, and that's because it's infinite. It has no sort of bottom to it. It's just bottomless and fathomless, and that's an extraordinary thing
Mm.
to feel. We are feeling that actually,
Yeah.
but we're
Yeah.
overlooking it. That's what we're experiencing.
Mm. We're overlaying it all the time and just moving
Hmm.
on. I mean, how does what you've found, this sort of diving into the
Hmm.
what's here and not finding anything, how does that help somebody else, in their everyday life where they feel like they're finding absolutely everything and they're not liking any of
Yeah, yeah.
it?
Oh, I mean, that's actually a really important question from my standpoint, because I don't really, while the way I speak about these things will sometimes strike people as, wow, it's very philosophical, it's kind of very abstract, and it's actually so practical. And the reason I would say that is that having all these definitions and descriptions and concepts about what's going on, actually one could fairly argue that that's good enough. It's like, why do I need to delve into what my sadness is or my happiness? I just have these words and that's good enough. It's far enough to just look at it in that kind of way and imagine that I actually do know what things are. And in some ways that's true. You don't have to explore the nature of reality to discover its infinite nature. It's not necessary. But what I would say is, to answer your question, well, let's take the suffering thing for a moment and say, well, why do we suffer? Um, I guess there's a lot of things I could say, but I guess what I would say most simply is that we we imagine ourselves as a person that's encountering various things in life, experiences, circumstances, events that we find, fill in the blank, overwhelming, stressful, confusing, threatening, problematic, right? So, right there is the genesis of suffering, in a sense. Like, I'm encountering something first, that I am someone encountering something, and that thing is a problem, basically, right?
Hmm.
So, of course, the ordinary approach to resolving suffering, the standard kind of approach, would be, okay, well, let's sort that out. We're still operating from the assumption that we know what these things are that you've just told me. Let's say I'm your therapist or your teacher or whatever, or your friend. You've just defined the problem, like, let's come up with a solution to it, which is fine. I say there's two ways to solve problems. One is at the level of the way we're describing it. And, if I have a headache, I have a headache and I take steps to try to remedy the headache. That's solving at the level of the problem that's being defined, in a sense.
Hmm.
Then the other way to solve the problem is to realize that there is no problem, actually. To realize that what we think of as problems, are not things, actually. This is a radical proposition.
Yeah,
That
somebody
they're
who's really
actually,
suffering could find that hard to swallow.
yeah, 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 no, for sure. And by the way, those two kind of approaches don't they can happily coexist. I
Yeah.
can address my headache at the level of the headache, and I can also explore what a headache is and
Mhm.
realize it's not a fixed thing. It is an infinite, boundless, indescribable display of, I don't know what, of energy, of information, of mystery. Ultimately, I don't know what a headache is. I
Mm.
do and I don't. It's very paradoxical, right? I know what
Yeah,
it
like
is when I
everything.
have one,
Yeah.
but when I look more with more a little more care, a little more precision at, like, well, let me really let me be a scientist about this, experiential
Mm.
scientist, and, like, check it out. Like, what is it?
Mhm.
And again, I can't, emphasize, like, how profound it is to begin to get a sense that everything that we're experiencing, that we think of as problematic and the source, therefore, of our suffering, turns out to not be merely what we think it is, and is actually the shining forth of some inexplicable radiance, some miracle of life, you could say, of existence. And as that, It's like, you could say, to make it, kind of simplify, it would be, one version of reality is, I'm an individual experiencing anxiety. I don't like the anxiety. I want it to go away. I find it's a source of suffering. That's kind of the normal perspective. And then there's this perspective I'm pointing to, which is actually what I'm calling me is infinity, boundless infinity, ungraspable, unfathomable infinity. And the experience that's occurring is also the same thing fundamentally, ungraspable, fathomless, boundless infinity. So one perspective, John experiencing anxiety, true within that frame of reference. That same description is also could be described as infinity experiencing infinity. And there is just infinity, nothing that, there is not a problem. There is not, it's just freedom from, it's really freedom from language, freedom from concepts. Not because I've stopped thinking, but because I've seen that my concepts are not holding reality. So it's freedom from all the ideas and all the seeming implications that flow forth from those ideas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Would you say it's a personal view and an impersonal view?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think that'll be another way of characterizing it. The other way I sometimes describe it is, one view is the view of, or the perspective of, the seemingly describable world, which is the world.
Yeah.
Most people, it's the only world that seems to be true. And then there's the perspective of experience itself, which is not describable. And it's just a free fall into mystery, into the unknown. And that, so coming back to your practical question about like, how is this relevant to people's lives? I would say, in the most basic way, the fruit of the discovery that this is indescribable and unresolvable, and it's because of its infinite nature, equates to less suffering and more enjoyment. Because the other thing is that a lot of what we're experiencing is kind of just discounted as insignificant, inconsequential sort of noise in the system, that, the little flickers on the wall, or the fact that, this is colored that way, or this is shaped that way, or there's all this detail that's going on, right? An infinite amount of detail that we're not really attending to very much. We're just not appreciating very much. But this is also the unfathomable richness of the moment. It's infinite richness. So, there we could be sitting in our living room, which we've done countless times before, or we think we've done countless times before, and there's not much going on, and we feel a little bit bored and dissatisfied, and life feels sort of not very fulfilling. And that, again, that is all being described into existence, literally.
Yeah. Mental activity. Yeah.
Because actually, what's going on is always this unthinkable fullness, this unthinkable vitality and aliveness and vibrancy and potency, and I could go on and on. You know what I mean? That's why what's called this extraordinary moment. It's not as dull and mundane and as we might imagine. It's
when you
far
really
from it.
when you really sink into it, when you really seemingly drop all of that mental activity, and you're just resting with what is right here, right now, that, and just allowing it to almost show itself, to just reveal the magic of just this, that when the mental activity is there, it's not seen. And then when you drop that, or I don't even know whether that's the right word, but when you just focus your attention here and just explore what's here, it just seems to get richer and richer. I know you're very good at in your videos that you sort of take people on a journey to this, and it's like you talk for half an hour about just this and there are no words about this, but you manage to be able to lead people on a journey through this, but I'm just wondering how other people can find it. Is it's a feeling sense rather than a mental sense, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually, I think. And apropos that, something you said, which, um, kind of about the way that the mental narratives can sort of seem to get in the way of discovering this. And I think that might be part of the reason why you've seen a lot of contemplative practices, meditation practices. There's this effort to quiet thinking, or maybe even shut it down altogether. Or, there's other ways to sort of do that through taking various substances that kind of suppress the thinking apparatus and the interpretations, so that something else is revealed about this that's beyond thought. Now, my own view of that is I tried to do that for decades and I failed to shut my mind off, and because I thought that was necessary. But the way I look at it now is that it's not necessary, because no matter what the mind is doing and saying about this moment, the moment is still beyond the mind. So it doesn't matter that the mind is doing its thing. That's what it does. It's like
the moment's still there, whether there's a busy mind or not. Yeah,
exactly. The moment is still there. And in fact, the feeling of the moment, like you made that distinction between the kind of the felt sense and then the concepts about what is being experienced or being felt, you could say. When I say felt, I don't mean emotion. I just mean the feeling of what's
the
here,
visceral,
the presence of it, the visceral sense of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's still here, even if there's a lot of mental overlay on top of it. Of course, it's still here. And so that's why in my work, I'm just saying, if you're going to do something, just notice that those two things are not the same. In other words, the ideas we have about what's going on here don't actually correlate with reality. They don't actually align with what's really happening. I mean, I think the simplest example of that, Colette, is one of our deepest assumptions is that things endure over time. We don't even question that for the most part. And that's how we even have language that describes things as things, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sitting in a room, and that presumes that there's a thing called a room that has a kind of stasis to it, a kind of stability to it, that it's a room now, and in the next instant it's still the same room. And that's how I can talk about it as my living room that I'm sitting in. Or if I have an experience, I'm experiencing fear, and I've just described something called fear, and that suggests that it is a thing that's enduring, right? But so that's the concept. The concept is that things endure over time. What's our actual experience? Our actual experience, which we're feeling right now, if we just notice, is, wow, my experience has absolutely zero endurance. The moment is here quite literally for no time whatsoever. Not as something, certainly not as something fixed or identifiable, because what appears as experience, we say, takes shape as the moment. And then the interpreting mind jumps on and says, this is what the shape of the moment is. Now I've just described what's happening, and I tell you about it, let's say. Here's what's happening with me. It's like, what I just described is gone.
Yeah.
Because this is dynamic. It's alive. It's moving.
It's changing. Yeah.
It's changing every flash instant, even faster than that. And so,
but I wonder whether people can get a sense of that, how other people can, when they're looking and thinking, well, this looks so solid, when I go to the feeling sense of this, I'm in a 17th century stone barn, so you think this is enduring. But actually, when I go to the feeling sense, I can't even find the walls. I can't find any boundaries from the, and then I look and there's a wall. But I know if I look long enough, that will start to sort of break up a little bit. So I suppose in a way, you invite people to muse this sort of concept of the there is this ever changing, And just in that, offering up that idea, it perhaps gives them a chance to feel into, you know, where the boundaries are, where they're even just the boundary of the body. You know, when you look, when you feel it, you can't find it. You know, the
No,
inside and the outside of the body. There's no there's no boundary.
right. I mean, that's another one where we assume, I think of these as sort of these kind of almost fundamental, if you will, assumptions that we carry about the way things are. One is that things endure over time, that there even are things. We can look at experience and realize there's actually no stability to experience. It's absolutely a shapeshifter, vanishing, right? Another assumption, of course, is the one of separation. It's fundamental sort of belief that, and it's understandable because the world appears very much differentiated. You know, there's, if I look visually at the room I'm sitting in right now, I see all these differentiated, what I would call objects, you know, the light, the bookshelf, the statue over there, and the guitar next to it, and the chair next to that, and right. So I see all these different objects, and so the world shows up differentiated, and even subjectively, my thoughts that I can identify as thoughts, in contrast to, let's say, a sensation. How is that possible to see, to perceive them as distinct from one another? That's because they show up in some sense as distinct dimensions of experience, right? But it's very interesting, like it's trippy. I mean, you think of, like, let's take two that are clearly distinct phenomena, like subjectively. Thought. So there's a thought. I'm going to think about what I'm going to do after our call. So just have this thought. I have to get in my car and drive somewhere. There's a thought. I can see the thought in a sense, or I can feel its presence. There's a thought. And at the same time, I can also hear sound. And sound's very distinct from thought. It's like a different dimension of reality, right? There's the sound of my voice, the sound of cars outside, the sound of your voice. Sound, thought, they're differentiated from one another. Now, people can do this if they're listening. So now let me look and see, can I actually find any separation, any boundary between thought and sound? Can't find one.
No,
They're
all appearing
blended
in the same place.
They're blended. I don't even know where they're appearing exactly, but they're it's like they're seamless. You know, there's where there's the boundary of sound, and it ends, and then there's a gap, and then there's this thing called thought, and they clearly have a line around them setting the boundary of what it is, but that's not the way it actually is.
No.
It's like, I used this analogy once. It just came to me and I turned out I just loved it, of like a pot of soup. And you make a pot of soup and you throw a bunch of vegetables in it and a bunch of different spices, and then and you're having the soup. You're eating the soup, drinking the soup, and you can recognize those distinctive flavors. Like there's the salty flavor, and there's the flavor of cumin or cayenne or whatever spice is in it, ginger, and there's different vegetable flavors, and they all appear as distinct and differentiated. This is really like a miraculous thing about life. It's one soup. It's all mixed together. There's no separation between anything.
Of course.
And yet, I think it was Nisargadatta said this. I'm not sure, but somebody told me this, that the world is differentiated, but not separate.
Wow.
So you and I are differentiated in one sense.
Yeah.
And yet, when we go to look for where is the boundary separating John from Colette, visually, energetically, conceptually, you literally find no walls here. There's no space between us, actually. There's no gaps anywhere. There's just experience. There's no gaps anywhere. There's no boundary. There's no walls. It's pure openness. There's no...
And isn't that isn't it amazing that it can appear as this, you know,
Yes.
it can appear as this.
It's the
So
magic
amazing.
show. It's the magic show.
Absolutely amazing.
It's so brilliant. It's just so
Yeah.
incredible that it can look like all of this,
Yeah.
you know, it's like you and I've talked about this before about the rainbow, right? And you look at
Yeah.
the rainbow and what do you see? You see the distinct colors, and you and I can talk about there's the red, there's the orange, there's the yellow. But
Yeah.
it's a spectrum, it's a continuum. There's no separate colors, but it looks like there are. That's life.
Mm.
It looks like there's separation. And then when you go and you look a little more carefully, you realize, holy cow, there's nothing, there's no
Nothing
division.
there.
And there's no inside and outside. That's an artificial distinction. We believe like, what do you mean? Like outside and inside? Where's the boundary line? Oh, we think there's a boundary between here and there. It's very similar to inside and outside. I'm here,
Yeah.
you're over there. Where's the
Yeah.
boundary?
But where's the boundary? Yeah. It's just we
It's
don't
the
really
boundary.
look, don't we? We don't inquire. We just
We
yeah,
assume.
we just sort of almost like mesmerized by the appearance of things,
Yeah,
or just caught up in that we don't stop to really experience what's happening. You know, it's like the show is as got us all hypnotized.
yeah,
And
yeah.
also the emotions, you know, that come with those labels that people told us that you shouldn't be angry, you shouldn't be, you know, there's all the other layers and concepts and conditioning that goes with all of the outside, seemingly outside world. But like you
Right.
say, this is everything. So all of
Yeah,
that that's appearing is this just spaceless, boundless, not spaceless, but just boundless isness
right.
is everything. So it's that and this. I think before I was like, oh, you sort of think, oh, you want to get rid of that. You just have this, but that is this. Everything is this.
That's right. And circling back to your question about the sort of what's the practical value of discovering
Mm.
this. In this case, what we're sort of highlighting is how this is undivided. So what? What's in it for me? You know,
Yeah.
from a well-being kind of standpoint, or from the
Mm-hmm.
standpoint of, you know, what humans seem to be searching for, and we could say well-being's as good as anything. People, that sense of fulfillment and contentment and satisfaction and so on.
Wholeness.
Yeah, that search. What do we tend to do? The search is, we're usually typically looking to find that in particularities, in particular
Yeah.
moments or states that we define as whatever we're looking for: well-being, freedom, God, you know, fill in the blank. So whatever it is we're aspiring to realize, we think it exists in particular moments that look a certain
Yeah.
way, that feel a certain way, that we define a certain way. And so then what happens is we feel like we find it, we secure it. Oh, I'm feeling it now, boy. I'm feeling the well-being. And then what happens? You know,
It
it
goes.
changes, it goes away. And but what we're talking about is wait, there's a singularity, there's an undivided, there's no word for what that is undivided. We could just call it this, we could call it presence, we could call it life, we could call it God. All the words are, they don't capture it, obviously. But discovering that singularity, we discover that, amazingly enough, that what we're looking for is found in everything, actually. In everything that appears is this, you know, the ground of being or the presence. Everything that appears, so every thought, every feeling, every sensation is it, is home, the home of reality, the home of what is, the home of this miracle that's present, that's, and obviously that's, well, that's a game changer, right? Because then we can, I know in some of, you know, your talks that I've watched, and you talk a lot about rest, and there's resting in this, but but there's also a way to think about like discovering the way in which this is everything, and therefore we don't have to twist ourselves up into some sort of knot to find this, or micromanage our experience to get ourselves into the proper state of mind. Rather, we can absolutely relax and rest because everything that's appearing, everything that's arising is it actually, is the ground, is the wholeness that we're searching for. And what could be, that's the great freedom, that's the great relief, that's the great rest, because
there's nothing to get. It's already this. It's just this. It's already here, and it's
right.
always
It's
with you.
It's showing up as every moment. It's showing up as this moment. Here it is.
Yeah.
And so we're home. Always.
Disappear. Maybe you could do a little journey and, you know, exploring this extraordinary moment, if you don't mind. I think it would just give people a chance to experience what's always here, you know, what's available always, what's you know, it always is just this moment. It's always here. And I think so many people feel like they're missing something, they've got to get something there. When I'm there, I'll feel better. When I've got it, when I'm awake. And this awakeness is always here.
Yeah, I think that, I'd be happy to guide a little exploration. And just to set that up, just to say that, you know, we have this sense often like, if I could just get everything, my experience and circumstances just all arranged just in the right way, then I can feel like I'm home. Then I can feel like I'm well, that I can come to rest, right? Now I've got everything in order, right? So, and then of course what happens is life just scatters it all, you know, in the next instant is like, then I'm like trying to like get everything back in order again. And so
because it's always changing, you know, it's always changing. It's never stable.
And plus, because of what we were talking about earlier about how we define things, and what we see, we just see the way in which everything, and you were kind of saying this too, that not only do we have the labels, but then we have the kind of added on evaluations. Like, not only do I know what this is seemingly because I have a label for it, but then I have an idea about, is it okay?
Whether I like it or not.
Do I like it or not? Is it a benefit? Is it a threat? That whole evaluation process just keeps us on this just endless kind of search to try to find and locate, you know, what we're looking for, you know, in
organize
life.
And to control and to make it all just fit how we want it to fit, and then we'll be fine. It's like jumping out. It's never going to we're never going to be happy with that ever changing.
Well, we're looking for something that's kind of, you would think like something I can count on, kind of a stability and a security and a sense of like, now I've got it, you know. And of course there's nothing but the constant change, right? So so what I say is, and that a really powerful way to discover that everything is it, that everything is of one, whatever you want to call it, one basic reality, is to find, because we're always emphasizing how everything is distinct, which it is at one level, distinct and different, the differentiation. How do we find that it's all the same? And I think a powerful doorway into that is to sort of locate what I call the common denominator of experience. So I say, you know, if sadness is appearing, or anxiety or insecurity, it's like, well, my well-being has disappeared, right? I would say typically. And I'm suggesting, well, actually there's like a deeper, I call it the well of being, you know, that underlies, is the basis of every moment, of every seemingly different state. And by exploring that and getting acquainted with that, what's basic about experience, we discover the way in which everything is fundamentally the same, and we tap into what we could say is the unconditioned well-being that doesn't depend upon how it looks.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
so what I'll guide, just to briefly, like a little invitation to explore one doorway into the common denominator, which is just the sense of being. So here we are, we're sitting here, and there's just this incredible, like, array of things happening: thoughts, feelings, sensations, little tremors in the body, um, all these different, distinct, as we were saying, phenomena, with all the various labels that we have for them, the way they seem to be, the way we're describing them, everything unique, everything different. But no matter what we're experiencing, like, let's say there's a sense of tiredness. What's really fundamental about that thing that we're describing, that moment that we're describing of being tired, if that's what's arising right now, what's fundamental about it is that it's being. If we feel energized and elevated and inspired, or what's fundamental about those descriptions is that they exist, they're being. Whether we're having wonderful, imaginative, colorful, blissful thoughts about something, or very worrisome, ruminative thoughts, what's fundamental about either of those situations right now, if the mind's very calm or very agitated, no matter what's fundamental about those thoughts is that they're being. So as we're, like, traveling around, if you will, consciousness sort of traveling around all this diversity of experience, everywhere we go, we could say, yes, we meet all the different flavors of life, but we're also meeting the being of everything, the beingness of everything, what the Buddhists call the suchness of everything, the isness, just the fact that it is. It's like there's just this being. It's a continuum of being. Everywhere, in every moment, what we find is being. And it can look like all the different ways that it looks, but it fundamentally is beingness of everything. The beingness of us, the beingness of the world, presumably outside of us. Even if you feel that now, you feel what you think of as yourself, the body, the mind, the personality, your being, you just feel that. And it's very obvious. Here we are, being. And then if you imagine that there's something outside of you, like a world, maybe the atmosphere, the air around you, and you go to find that, I mean, if you think it exists, an outside of you, go find it right now, that outside, and what do you find? You feel the presence of, let's say, the atmosphere around the body, and what do you find? Being. It is. You feel it. That's the beingness of everything, the felt sense of it. So you just find being wherever you go. Nothing but being. You find the aliveness of everything. No boundary, just being. That can look like calmness, can look like agitation, can look like fear, can look like joy, can look like a self, can look like a world, can look like feeling bound, can look like feeling open. But it's all being, fundamentally. This is a being, this is a presence that you cannot lose. It's not a state that comes and goes. It is the basis of everything that's coming and going, being. You could call it presence. The presence of what is. Doesn't come and go. Even though, paradoxically, it's always coming and going. But it's always itself, it's always being, always present. Never can be lost. Because it's the only thing that exists. It's being. Nothing outside of it. There's just being. And just let yourself feel the nourishment of that being, the vitality of it, the lusciousness of it, the richness of the being. Has no bottom to it. It's sparkling, shimmering, subtle, beyond subtle, beyond subtle, and yet also very much concrete and here, palpable. The basis of everything, being.
Mm.
Never absent.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Never absent.
And it's the
Never.
same being, the
Yeah.
same for everyone. You know, I think
Yeah.
we perhaps think that it's individual, my being and your being. It's the same being. There's no boundaries. It's the same being.
Can't find it.
Universal.
I can't find it. I mean,
No.
you know, I mean, the experience of subject and object, you know, can appear and does appear, but it's just another way the beingness can look. And
Yeah.
it can also look like seeing through the subject object distinction. It can look like anything, but it always is. It's just this primal, you know, I sometimes very similarly, but with a slightly different twist on it, say it's like moving from our ordinary, our typical orientation is to what is it that's appearing and is it okay, basically. What's appearing and is it okay? How am I defining it based on how I'm defining it? And I say, well, that's cool. You know, it's like, but how about getting interested just in the fact of the appearing itself? That's really what I'm talking about. That's because that's the being, that's the aliveness. That's wow, it's appearing. It appears as all this diversity of human experience in the world. It's just unfathomable. It's just, you understand why the Tibetans call it the magical display. I mean, it's such a magical display. The way, I mean, the appearance, you know, and it's how crazy is it that it's really here for no time because of its dynamic nature, and yet it appears like it's holding still in a way, which is what allows us to, like, you're holding still kind of long enough that I can have what I call a conversation with you. You know, it's got a kind of seeming stability to it, but it's paradoxical because when I look, it's like I can't grasp hold of it because it's gone, and yet it's here. So it's really trippy.
Yeah, I think this is where the gratitude almost comes in as well. We mentioned the other day we were talking, and it's just like, wow, you know, just in wonder of it all, and that gratitude of that we get to experience this that can seem very mundane to the mind, that's just put labels on it, like we said earlier. But actually, when you really experience it, not for the labels, just for the experience, there is that gratitude that it's almost like you've been given a gift. But it's the gift of yourself, because it's always here and it's who you are. But it feels like a gift to me. I'm always sort of feeling really grateful and blessed, and that I've found this. But it's always been here. It's always here and always been here. And but it still feels really special and like a gift.
Absolutely. It is.
Mm.
It's a gift that, it's like a treasure, you know, that you never get to the end of the treasure.
And that we didn't realize we had all along.
Right. It's all innocent, you know. It's if we take an impersonal sort of perspective on all of it, like something that's doing all of this, that's creating all of this, including us, that we don't have an actual independent existence from it, from the whole. This is all the business of the whole, business of the divine doing all of this dance. It seems to be engaged in this, what do you want to call it? They call it the Leela, you know, in the Hindu tradition, the play. And the play is one of seemingly losing sight of itself, right? Like the divine misses itself. Like, where did I go? And then it goes on a search for itself, right? It splits itself into seemingly an infinite number of pieces and parts, and then imagines it's it's lost itself. And yet all the while it's being itself. It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. It's like it becomes a wave, and then the wave imagines, where's the ocean? Where has it gone? And meanwhile, it is the ocean's expression. Isn't it the craziest thing?
Yeah. It's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't not be the ocean. You feel, it seems as if there's an individual, but you can't not be the ocean, the wave, and you can't not be you. It never leaves.
No, in one sense, there's not even a wave.
Yeah, it's just a label.
Because the wave is the wave is, where is the actual beginning? Like, let's say you're a wave and I'm a wave. I'm a phenomena that's, reality has created the wave of you, right? The where is the beginning of the wave? Just like in an oceanic wave, where's the beginning of the wave?
Yeah.
Where did it start?
What point? Well, there's no point. Yeah.
No point.
There's no point.
No point. The beginning of the wave is the ocean. So
but I think that point is believed in. If you think you're separate, you believe in that separate. You can't see that you're not. You can't see that you're joined. You can't see that you never left. When you're sort of like looking away, as if the waves looking away to the sky, going, like you say, where's the sea? Where's the sea? Yeah. We're a bit like that when we think we're individuals, or I'm alone. Yeah. I'm alone. Where is everybody? I'm alone. I'm alone.
Yeah, exactly. I'm disconnected from the whole somehow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just
I've got to find my way back. Yeah. You never left.
I don't know. I don't speculate on like why it is. It's just the nature of reality to be that way. To seeming
it's just what's happening.
And then experience the joy of refinding itself, like, oh my God, like I've always been home. I thought I'd been cast out of home, and I am this, like,
you've had the contrast, so you appreciate this. Maybe that's why it feels like a gift. You've had the contrast of not knowing this, so that's why it feels like a gift. Because
I think so. I think so. The contrast is quite something.
And in fact, your book is very practical. I hadn't realized. There's a lot of exercises in your latest book, isn't there? So actually, there's a little bit of writing, then there's an exercise, some more writing, then an exercise. I hadn't realized that, because YouTube videos are quite, like we did that exploration, and that's beautiful. But actually, then I realized actually they are practical. It's just I didn't realize your YouTube videos are practical, because you do say, now let me just show you. So you do, they are practical, but you
I
don't
hope so.
realize they're practical. It's hidden. You hid,
If they're not practical,
you
I
hid the
should
work.
stop them. Yeah, no, they're very practical, I think.
Yeah, but I hadn't, for some reason, I hadn't realized. And it was only when I saw it written down and how you do, I was like, hang on, he's doing that in his videos. But yeah, for some reason, I hadn't really noticed it. I think you just trick us into doing the exercises without realizing. let me just hypnotize you into this present moment.
No,
That's what it is.
just no hypnosis involved. It's just it's just inviting you into your experience, to let experience hypnotize you into its nature, and
I meant it in a good way. Yeah,
as you said very beautifully earlier, it's like it reveals its nature to us if we just notice. If we just notice it. Yeah.
And then it just gets more and more magical. And it's not about the environment that you're in. Because I've experienced it looking at a door handle in a hotel room and looking at an amazing view. It's the same experience. There's nothing, sometimes in my videos, people will say to me, it's all right for you, you're sat in that lovely garden. It's no difference, because it's not about the garden.
No.
It's about the experience, not the experience of the garden, just the experience of this moment. And it's the same moment wherever you are. Yes, I do know, basic survival things come into play, obviously, but beyond that, it's just the same experience wherever you are. And like you say, when the mind's busy, it's still the same experience. Fundamentally, it's the same experience. And if we can just get that, if we can just grasp that, all of that can play out, all the ups and downs can play out, because it's always just fundamentally just this. And just this is delicious. And it's getting that and not getting it because it is already here, but it's that uncovering.
They have this wonderful term. I don't even know what tradition it comes out of, if you've heard it before, the term the one taste of everything.
Yeah.
And I love it because
it is like that. Yeah.
We experience all the different tastes of life, all the different flavors. Some of them we prefer more than others, understandably, right? Like I prefer pleasure over pain, the flavor of pleasure over the flavor of pain.
Yeah.
The one taste is discovering, like in that little inquiry I was inviting folks into, of being, that's, we could say, one way of touching the one taste of just the sheer existence of everything. That's the flavor of everything, is its existence, its beingness, its presence. Those are just all synonyms really for something that doesn't have a word, but that's the one taste of everything. Like you said, we think I'm experiencing the garden, or I'm experiencing whatever crappy environment you might be in, not so beautiful in the ways we might typically define beauty. But in both cases, what you're also just experiencing experience.
Yeah. And it's
and
the
that's
same.
The one taste. And that's the one taste. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's the one taste for everybody.
Yeah.
Your taste isn't better than my taste, and it's the same. It's just this.
Well, I don't actually really know about your taste.
Yeah, we don't know.
But we can share notes as we are today, and it seems as if there's some correspondence between the tastes, but but I don't really know.
And there's a sense, that I exist. That same I exist, I amness is the same for everybody. We all have that sense of existence. I exist, whether we think it's a single I or the universal I exist. And for me, it feels like, I don't know why, but it's almost a knowing that's the same for everybody. Just to exist.
I mean, the really wild thing is that from the perspective of just existence, boundless, undivided existence, there aren't other individuals having experience. There's just boundless existence without that looks like and is experienced as each one of us and living our particular lives. You have a particular life,
Yeah.
I have a life with its own history and all of that. And all of that is there.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
that's what I
all
like.
included.
I like that about your work, that you don't say, you know, that everything's included, because it is. We're having this separate
Yeah,
experience. But what is the fundamental ground of that?
exactly.
That's always there, that's abiding, as you beautifully say.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
It's lovely to chat with you. Oh,
yeah, really nice. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. I know you're really busy doing lots of things. You're doing more things for the Sam Harris app, aren't you? I think.
Yeah,
Recording.
I just recorded some new content for that app. It was a lot of fun doing that. I did it yesterday, actually.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I look forward to that. And we can see you have a Zoom every Sunday as well, don't you? That people can join. And I
do. I host a Sunday here I'm in California, and it's in the morning time in California. And people can find all that stuff on my website if they're curious. So have links to everything from books to music to talks that I've given, meditations that I've created, lots of stuff there for people to play around with. So yeah.
Well, I've really enjoyed your work. I think what's helped me, for me, you know, I had very much this sense of being, and I think you commented on some of my videos that, you know, you could see that I was just being talking being but I really feel like I've had chance to marinate and wash in this being and explore, you know, just, it's hard to describe what it is. It's just, you're swimming in it constantly, and it's just got new depths to it, new magic to it, that I maybe was just being, but just not. It's hard to describe. It's just got a depth and a richness to it that I maybe wasn't experiencing before. So thank you for that. I feel like you pushed me down that rabbit hole. You filled it in, run off.
It's a rabbit hole with
swimming.
the rabbit hole with no end. So that's the good news. The good news is that it's just like you said, you know, there's no end to the amazingness. It's not like some final arrival, like I've got it all figured out. You know, this is infinity. There's no final arrival.
Yeah, beautiful. No, stop. There's no stop sign. End. The end.
I could pack up my bag. I figured it all out. Yeah, not true.
No, it just keeps on going. It's delicious, as I often say.
Endlessly.
So thank you for helping me find this deliciousness.
It's a joy to get a chance to talk, Colette. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thanks a lot. We'll leave it there.
All right, sounds good.